Also tonight, President Trump responding to Kim Jong-un's threat to pull out of the June 12th summit, and he is refusing to back away from the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And the media, the left, promised a smoking gun. Remember the Trump Tower meeting between Donald Trump Jr. and the Russian lawyer? Okay, the Senate released all the documents, and in spite of what the media is telling you, a total dud. It's going nowhere. We'll explain. Also, a stunning report, new from the FBI, launched a secret investigation. It has a name, into the Trump campaign, only days after they rigged and put the fix in the Clinton email investigation. Now, the New York Times is inadvertently confirming everything that we have been telling you about all of this regarding the massive abuse of power and corruption. Now, also tonight, Congressman Mark Meadows, Jim Jordan, Ron DeSantis, they are fighting back hard against the DOJ and their obstruction. They're now urging the president to get involved. We need the documents released. They're demanding to see it. All right, a lot to cover in tonight's Breaking News Opening Monologue. All right, we start tonight with another stinging setback for the special counsel, Robert Mueller. President Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, is saying tonight Robert Mueller will not seek a presidential indictment. Now, it's obvious why Mueller won't even try, because, as we've been telling you, he never had a legal leg to stand on. Now, DOJ guidelines clearly state that a sitting president cannot be indicted. Not to mention Mueller doesn't have a reason to even do so in the first place. Mueller has zero evidence of collusion, has only been focused on the so-called thought crimes of the president, and it's not a crime to have thoughts. Rudy Giuliani also reacting to tomorrow being the one-year anniversary of Mueller's corrupt investigation. Here is part of his interview. Will air tonight with Laura Ingraham. Take a look at this.
What is your optimal timeline for this to wrap up?
They should do it today. I mean, as soon as possible. I think that they have the facts from which they can write their report. If you're going to write a fair report, fine, write it. If you're going to write an unfair report, write it, and we will combat it. We're ready to rip it apart.
Former New York City mayor, he's right about this. He also told our own Laura Ingraham about the damage that this investigation is doing to this country. And here's what he said.
When you look at all the main flashpoints, the Trump Tower meeting, the Stormy Daniels payment, the raid on Manafort, the raid on Cohen, is there any one part of that that concerns you more than other parts of that?
Yeah, their inability to reach a conclusion that is obvious, and their unwillingness to recognize the damage this does to our country all over the world. This was engineered by Comey.
We're going to have much more on this in just a minute with Joe DeGeneva, our own Greg Jarrett, and Laura's full interview with Rudy Giuliani airs tonight right after this program. But first, on the foreign policy front tonight, President Trump, he's not blinking in the standoff with Kim Jong-un and North Korea. Now, remember, Kim Jong-un is now trying to act tough. His ego's been bruised. He's threatening to withdraw from the summit in Singapore. North Korea is also saying that denuclearization will not be on the table. Yeah? Well, President Trump responded by stating directly that his peace through strength policies continues. Take a look.
Can the Korean summit be salvaged?
We haven't been notified at all. We'll have to see. We haven't seen anything. We haven't heard anything. We will see what happens. Whatever it is.
Well, obviously, the liberal media in a frenzy over this development, because think about it, for them to succeed is for the president to fail. For the Democrats to succeed is for the country to fail. But the president is standing firm on denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And National Security Advisor John Bolton is also saying this is just part of the game that North Korea always plays, except unlike Clinton, we're not trying to bribe the guy.
The question is whether this really is a sign that that they're not taking our objective of denuclearization seriously. You know, Kim Jong-un told South Korean President Moon Jae-in at their April the 27 inter-Korean summit that he agreed to denuclearization. And so if they're walking back from it, we'll find out. I think Sarah Sanders said this morning pretty much what the president's thinking is if they're ready to meet, we're ready to meet. If they're not ready to meet, then they won't meet.
And we have the 3 hostages back. He's not firing missiles. He crossed the DMZ. Okay, so far a win. Now what's happening here is the policy of trust but verify. President Trump, he's not giving up anything with North Korea, which is why he keeps saying, well, we'll see what happens. Now Kim Jong-un, well, he's the one that has made every concession. He gave up the hostages. We didn't have to appease him with a plane load of cash and other currencies or $150 billion like Obama did with Iran. So the ball is in Kim Jong-un's court. He wants to talk. He wants a deal. He wants a better life for his people. President Trump's ready to listen. North Korea will not be allowed to threaten the world and build nuclear weapons. That's a fact. And the president, he's made it crystal clear. All right, we're also getting clarity on another major story tonight. Remember how for the past year, the left-wing media, the Democrats, promising that Trump Tower meeting was somehow the big smoking gun of Russia collusion? Okay, tonight, in spite of media reports, we now have the evidence it was a total dud. Now, the Senate Judiciary Committee, they released thousands of pages of the testimony, several key players at the meeting. The main takeaway is this. They all thought it was a waste of their time. They were talking about adoption, the McGinsky Act. No dirt on Hillary Clinton came through. And by the way, if it did, it wouldn't be illegal, and we'll explain that tonight. Now, from all accounts, this meeting quickly went off the rails, eventually focused in on topics like Russian adoption and Russian adoption. It's a nothing burger. And the media, they've been hyping this as a cruise missile that was going to take down the Trump administration. Donald Trump Jr., he testified he was skeptical going into the meeting and that his suspicions were quickly justified. And Donald Trump Jr. also said that his father, President Trump, had nothing at all to do with it in any way, shape, matter, or form. And despite all of this wild and false speculation, it's nothing. The Trump Tower meeting isn't the only breaking news story that actually is embarrassing to the destroy Trump media. New York Times, now this is an amazing story. They hate President Trump. They're now basically tonight confirming everything we have been telling you regarding the biggest abuse scandal in the history of the country. Now, it's not a mea culpa from the liberal New York Times. Frankly, it was inadvertent, which is probably why the so-called paper of record, they're kind of playing cleanup. Now, this was their original headline today. This is pretty amazing. A secret mission, a code name, and anxiety inside the early days of the FBI's Trump investigation. Well, they changed the headline. Code name Crossfire Hurricane, the secret origins of the Trump administration. Great to know somebody in the FBI likes the Rolling Stones. Okay, why would they change it? Let me explain what happened in this article. It's a long article. The Times explains how the FBI opened a top secret, completely unconventional operation into the Trump campaign. By the way, only days after they rigged the investigation into Hillary, and the same exact players. Now, the details were closely guarded by FBI officials. This all happened days, just days, after the same people put the fix in with the exoneration before investigation of Hillary Clinton, rigging it knowing she committed felonies and obstruction of justice. In other words, everything we've been exposing. So to break it down this way, in the summer of 2016, the FBI sends agents to London. They interview an Australian diplomat, Alexander Downer. The Times describes this interview as, quote, diplomatic protocol, highly unusual. Now, remember, Downer's the guy that got drunk one night with some guy, and I thought I knew everybody in the Trump campaign, George Papadopoulos. Never heard of him. The Trump advisor, nobody heard of. And during that night out, while they're drinking, they apparently gossiped like, I guess, mean girls about so-called dirt on Hillary Clinton. Downer then alerted the Australian intelligence agency, who then told their U.S. counterparts. 1, 2, 3, four-way hearsay. Now, this is massive. The Times is confirming that the FBI used four-way hearsay to launch an investigation, just like we've been telling you on the program. By the way, their timeline doesn't match up, and hearsay is never admissible, never mind four-way hearsay, in a court of law. So what the New York Times is proving is we've been right the entire time, and in the process of trying to cover up for their deep state friends and making excuses, they're actually exposing them. The Times and the rest of the media have been trying to get ahead of what is a massive scandal and protect the likes of Comey and McCabe and Strzok and Lynch and Page and everyone else. But they can't, because the facts, the evidence, the truth is finally coming out. And we have been promising you this, and so far what we've been uncovering is only the beginning. This is going to get a lot worse for all of these deep state actors before it ever gets better. Take a look at the side of your screen. James Comey, Andrew McCabe, Loretta Lynch, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, all at the center of this massive scandal. Comey's a liar and a leaker and probably broke the law in multiple ways. McCabe lied under oath multiple times. He could be facing criminal charges. Loretta Lynch, Oh, she tried to compromise the Clinton email investigation to get Comey to say it's not an investigation, it's only a matter. Then you have the FBI anti-Trump lovebird, Strzok and Page. They routinely abuse the president verbally, attacking him in their text messages, and Strzok's fingerprints are all over everything. Now, we'll have more on that in just a second. Now, we have another big story for us to tell you about. The DOJ's attempt to slow walk, stonewall, obstruct Congress from ever seeing over 1.2 million documents about the Clinton email server investigation and the Russia witch hunt, which should be coming to an end. Congressman Mark Meadows, Jim Jordan, Ron DeSantis, they're now asking the president to use his executive authority, instruct the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, who should be doing it on his own, to immediately turn over all documents that Congress has subpoenaed and has a constitutional right, co-equal branches of government, and a right to oversight and separation of powers. It is insane. It is unfair to you, the American people, that it has come to this, as Congress has the constitutional authority as part of their checks and balances. Rod Rosenstein, he has been concealing information and then needlessly redacting key parts of these things in the name of national security that gets proven later not to have anything to do with national security. Rosenstein claims that, but it's not true. We've seen this lie play out. It's about protecting all of his friends. And meanwhile, he is conflicted from the very beginning of all this. And by the way, was a no-show for a closed-door hearing with the Senate Intelligence Committee today. I wonder why. Now, several Obama administration officials, they were quoted, but Comey dodged the entire thing. That's telling. Think about this. Congressman Jordan and DeSantis will join us in a few minutes. All right, one more thing tonight. A major follow-up on the former Obama official who at one point voted for the communist for president. This is how this man ever became the CIA director is breathtaking to me, John Brennan. Paul Sperry reporting that Brennan, who has repeatedly threatened President Trump, you know, stay tuned, Mr. President, is now being exposed yet again as a liar, this time by his former colleagues. Now, last May, the former CIA director testified under oath the dossier didn't factor into the intelligence community's assessment of Russia election meddling. We've got the tape to prove it. Take a look.
Do you know if the Bureau ever relied on the Steele dossier as part of any court filings, applications, petitions, pleadings?
I have no awareness.
Did the CIA rely on it?
No.
Why not?
Because we didn't. It wasn't part of the corpus of intelligence information that we had. It was not in any way used as a basis for the intelligence community assessment that was done. It was not.
Mike Rogers and James Clapper are contradicting Brennan and saying that, yes, the dossier did play a role into what American intelligence agencies concluded, just like the Nunes memo and just like the Grassley-Graham memo. And on top of all of that, Sperry is reporting that Brennan handpicked Trump hater Peter Strzok to help work on this report. The same guy who put the fix in for Hillary and the same guy who trashed President Trump and text message after text message, and then a few days after exonerating and rigging the Hillary investigation, launches an investigation into Donald Trump. This deep state is one huge, giant, incestuous, corrupt swamp. And the more we learn that Peter Strzok is involved, his dirty fingerprints are over everything. Why does this guy even still have a job? Here was the reaction. Former U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Joe DeGenova, author of the soon-to-be #1 best-selling book, The Russian Hoax. What's the rest of it?
The illicit scheme to clear Hillary Clinton and frame Donald Trump, which is what they did.
Isn't that the amazing thing that the New York Times, in 12 printed pages, revealed today?
Right. The New York Times basically debunked their own reporting, their bombshell report last December that said it was the Papadopoulos bar talk. And today they admitted that the FBI had already opened the investigation by the time they learned about the Papadopoulos
because
case.
Their timing is off.
Right. June 20th, Steele writes the phony dossier claiming Trump-Russia collusion for 5 years. He hadn't, and helping Hillary, hurting Hillary Clinton and helping Trump. He hadn't been running but for 1 year. I mean, you'd have to be clairvoyant in the Kremlin to know that Trump was going to run. 2 weeks after he writes that dossier, He meets with the FBI. After that, they open the investigation, and only after that do they talk to Downer about Papadopoulos. So the truth
Downer's
is,
the guy that got drunk with.
it was the dossier, the fictitious dossier, that triggered the hoax.
And this is, I can't say this enough, Joe DeGenova. This is the Clinton bought and paid for dossier created by a foreign national. Foreign nationals are not supposed to impact our elections unless it's Obama trying to defeat Bibi. And it uses Russian lies, never verified, never told, then used to obtain a FISA warrant. They don't tell the FISA court they didn't verify it, they didn't corroborate it, nor do they tell the FISA court judges 4 times that, in fact, this was paid for by Hillary.
Yeah. Well, Sean, obviously it's been known for some time. We've been talking about it for more than a year, that part of the brazen plot, which included exonerating Hillary Clinton illegally, and then if Donald Trump won, to figure out a way to frame him, the FBI and the senior DOJ officials and John Brennan and James Clapper and James Comey set about on a plot to frame Donald Trump and the people in his campaign. They used all sorts of means and methods to do that, including the use of an agent provocateur who was unleashed on the campaign on the soil of a foreign country, and as a result of interviews with a number of people in the campaign, asking them, who approached you, a person that you never knew before, and started asking questions about foreign policy and seeing if they could, quote, help the campaign. It is now known who that agent provocateur was that the FBI used and John Brennan used and James Clapper. And tonight there's a flurry of concern in Washington in the law enforcement and intelligence community that his name will come out.
I think we already know, but I'll put that aside for a minute. Rudy Giuliani saying what we already know was policy and truth and fact. Oh, the special counsel is not going to indict Trump, and then saying, come out with your stupid report. And the Don Trump Jr. Meeting. What's so amazing is all of the exchanges talk about what a waste of time. This is ridiculous. This is about adoption. We've got a convention that might be brokered. And what's amazing is it wouldn't be illegal in the first place if they sought information. That is your point.
The media and Democrats were hysterical for months that the Trump Tower meeting with a Russian lawyer was a crime. And I wrote columns. You and I talked about it. I kept saying, what crime? What crime? One Harvard law professor tweeted out, it's treason. I'm sorry, Professor, we're not at war with Russia, and the treason law requires us to be at war. Second of all, Nancy Pelosi said, oh, it's a violation of federal campaign law. No, it's not, Nancy. Maybe you should have gone to law school, or just read the Federal Campaign Election Act, which specifically says, and you can read it on their website, foreign nationals may volunteer on American political campaigns. They're allowed to attend meetings, give information, and talk. And no, it goes on to say, volunteering services is not a campaign contribution. So it was never a crime. That was a hoax, too.
Unbelievable. Joe, this is your business. You agree with Greg's analysis, and also,
of course,
the timing of Crossfire Hurricane. I'm glad to hear there's somebody that likes the Rolling Stones that like me, but
part of the juvenile attitude at the FBI.
You know, when you say bad cops, it kind of stings, because I love the FBI.
No, dirty cops.
Dirty cop.
James Comey was the dirty cop in charge of a bunch of other dirty cops. And what you have here is, this was a criminal plot by senior people. John Brennan, James Comey, James Clapper, senior Department of Justice officials, to suborn the presidency of the United States through the use of false evidence. The false FISA warrants were obtained through lying to the FISA court. When all is said and done, Mr. Huber, who is conducting the grand jury to investigate the unmasking, the lying on the FISA court, and the leaking of information to the press, it will be shown without a shadow of a doubt that the reason Mr. Brennan has been lying in congressional testimony was from the beginning is because he knew that if he told the truth, he would reveal the plot that involved all the people. And that story in the New York Times today is a magnificent piece of evidence that there was in fact a plot. After all the denials, they say now that this Operation Hurricane was in fact exactly Crossfire Hurricane was exactly what we have been saying for a year.
So this is the
truth. There was an effort to undermine the candidacy of the opposition party. This is the most unbelievable scandal in the history of this country, and the New York Times just blew the lid off of it inadvertently.
Last word.
Well, he's absolutely right.
Can I just say one thing?
Yes.
Pardon me. So this really is about Hillary committed felonies. Hillary obstructed justice, deleting, acid wash. Then she had the investigation rigged, exoneration before investigation. Then they immediately begin this deep state attack on Donald Trump.
They needed a hook, and the hook was the phony, fictitious, fabricated dossier.
That leads to FISA court lies.
I dug deep into the interrogatories and the libel lawsuits against the author of the dossier, and he basically admits that his own dossier is of dubious credibility. That
was in England in another case.
Right. 50-50 proposition. It was raw intelligence. Come on, it may not have been true.
Wow. And it was used to presented to a court to get a warrant to spy on an opposition party candidate. We got a break. Thank you all. Thank you, Joe. When we come back, Jim Jordan, Ron DeSantis, Sarah Carter. We have more news we're going to be breaking about the president and this debunked Mueller probe and Newt Gingrich tonight. A lot of stories coming. I promise. Straight ahead. All right, welcome back to Hannity. Breaking news now. According to a report, the DOJ Inspector General, the one we've been waiting for, has completed a draft of a report as it relates to the handling of the Clinton email investigation. Here with reaction to all of this, Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan, Florida Congressman Ron DeSantis, also with us, Fox News contributor Sarah Carter. Sarah, let's talk to you first. We know it's supposed to come in May. It was first supposed to come in April. But they found new information as it relates to this, and new evidence and the new trail they were following. Where are we with this?
Well, it looks like it's wrapped up, and we were expecting it to wrap up in May. They extended that because they did find new information, and it's going to be imperative, I guess, for the Inspector General Horowitz to get all of that information into this report, which I believe he did, and now he will be releasing. So this is going to be very important. I mean, this is part of what Congress has been asking for all along. Remember, it's the Inspector General that has all of the documentation, the 1.2 million pieces of documentation that Congress has been practically begging for and pushing and threatening with subpoenas, the DOJ and the FBI. So this report is going to be very important.
Let me go to Congressman Jim Jordan. This is a big breakthrough on top of the letter that both you, Ron DeSantis, and Mark Meadows, who's not with us tonight, have put out, saying the president, you've got to get involved. You've got to tell the attorney general, and you have the power constitutionally to do so. There's over 1.2 million documents we're talking about here. And we know with the little bit we've gotten, as Andy McCarthy wrote, we've only have a few of the struck page memos just to begin with.
Right. Couple things. First, to the Inspector General's report. Remember, it was Michael Horowitz who uncovered the page-struck text messages where we've learned so much information. It was also Michael Horowitz and his team who determined that Andy McCabe had misled people, lied 4 different times, 3 times under oath. So we're all anxiously awaiting this report. I'm sure they'll have to, if it's a draft, there'll be some reviews that have to take place. But that's good news that we're going to be getting that soon. And more importantly, I think, is the letter we sent. We're just tired of the runaround we've been getting from the Department of Justice. It's time for them to turn over the information. And the one way that we know that can happen is for the head of the executive branch, the President of the United States, elected by the American people, to tell the Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General, and the FBI Director, give Congress a separate and equal branch of government.
And they would have to do it.
To see. Yes, and that's what we're asking the President to do.
Ron DeSantis, let me go to you because this is a very key point. We're talking about one, again, we've only got a small sampling of the Strzok Page memos, and it's so revealing. Insurance policies, how much they hate Trump, how Strzok, as we've been reporting tonight, is involved in everything. Literally interviews Hillary, she's exonerated. He's writing it months before the exoneration, before he interviews Hillary, 17 other witnesses. Then a few days later, then after they exonerate, rig an investigation into her. Now they're investigating Donald Trump. And that the timing, as the George Papadopoulos story, is blowing up in their face.
That's why, Sean, I think the combination of the IG report hitting hopefully very soon, and then if the president pulls the trigger on all this other information, we could have the gusher of information that provides all the clarity that we've been asking about all these different questions. And yeah, you talked about the beginning. How did this Russia probe even start? Very important questions. But even things going up into the special counsel. I mean, Rosenstein writes an appointing order appointing Mueller. The thing's defective on its face. So what does he do in August? He writes a secret addendum, a new appointing order, and then they've redacted most of it. They wouldn't even show the federal judge that.
That was about Paul Manafort after they already raided Manafort's home. I think the timing's backwards, and that shows corruption. Rosenstein also signing off on that ridiculous FISA application renewal, as did Sally Yates, as we saw in the New York Times piece today. All right, Sarah, here's a big question. I know the Inspector General did release some of the Strzok Page memo, text messages, so revealing. I don't know Michael Horowitz. I know he was appointed by Obama. Why should we believe he's going to do their job? Because the evidence about Hillary and committing felonies and obstruction, it's overwhelming and incontrovertible. Any American would get convicted. The fact that they exonerated her before investigating, it's overwhelming and incontrovertible. What makes you think that we're going to get the truth from him?
Look, I think there's two things here that are very revealing. And one, let me just start with your question. Everyone that I've spoken with, every source that I know who knows Michael Horowitz says this man is honorable, he'll stick to his guns, he will be straightforward with the American people and reveal the truth.
People said that about Mueller.
Saw that. No, but we saw that with the McCabe report. I mean, he went after McCabe. I think in this one he's going to go after Comey. He's going to go after Loretta Lynch in that meeting, that tarmac meeting. He's going to look at the scope. Yes, Strzok and Page, and the scope of the Clinton. Absolutely, absolutely, Sean. And I want you to think about the timing of the New York Times story, Crossfire Hurricane. They knew, the DOJ, as well as the FBI, that this report was going to come out. And look, it came out tonight. Right? So they needed to CYA, and they went straight to the New York Times and tried to tell their side of the story.
That's why,
a very limited
side. Isn't it
side.
amazing? Did you get the same feeling? The New York Times, while trying to justify and make excuses, all they really did was confirm everything you've reported. And
that's right. They've
confirmed the show is reported.
That's right. They've confirmed everything that's been reported, that we've reported, and they also gave away some information. They talked about at least one mole, at least one source, right?
Right.
So that means there may have been
You're
multiple
going to have a big story
sources.
tomorrow on the FBI informant that was in the Trump campaign, right? Am I jumping the gun here?
I hope so, yes.
Okay.
No, you might not be jumping the gun.
Why should we have faith, and great work, by the way, why should we have faith, Congressman DeSantis, same question, and Michael Horowitz?
Well, I mean, again, I think because he's the one who actually did tell us what Andy McCabe was up to. He's the one who did uncover the Page Strzok text messages. That's all good. Never forget, Sean, Comey has been fired. Well, I think we're going to get information about that in this report. Andrew McCabe, Deputy Director, fired. Jim Baker, Chief Counsel, demoted, reassigned. I want to know why that happened. We don't know the answer to that. We don't know why Peter Strzok is still there and what he's doing. So I think lots of those things that we're going to get answers to.
Last word, Congressman DeSantis.
Sean, we need to trust but verify. That's why if the president releases these documents, we can view Horowitz's report and then decide for ourselves with everything else.
Because they're the foundation of the Horowitz report, correct?
That's right.
Yep. All right, we're getting close. Great job, all of you. All right, when we come back, a report from the White House on North Korea. Will Kim Jong-un back out of the meeting with President Trump? Newt Gingrich reacts to that. This deep state development tonight. Get ready. Buckle up. This IG report's going to be very interesting. All right, today President Trump reacted to North Korea's latest threat. Poor Kim Jong-un's bruised ego that he may pull out of the high-stakes June 12th summit in Singapore. Here with a live report from the White House. Where things stand tonight is Fox News correspondent Kristen Fisher. Kristen, what's going on tonight?
Well, Sean, the White House is really downplaying this threat from North Korea. President Trump said today that the North Koreans haven't said anything to the White House about canceling next month's summit. They only know about it from that statement in the press. And the White House press secretary said that their threats did not come as a surprise.
This is something that we fully expected. The president is very used and ready for tough negotiations, and if they want to meet, we'll be ready, and if they don't, that's okay too. And we'll continue with the campaign of maximum pressure if that's the case, but like I just said, if they want to meet, the president will certainly be ready.
Now, North Korean officials cited ongoing joint military drills between the U.S. and South Korea as part of the reason why they're reconsidering. Another reason, they now say that they have no interest in a quote-unquote one-sided affair meant to pressure Pyongyang to abandon its nuclear weapons. But President Trump is standing firm, saying today that if the summit happens, he will still insist on complete and total denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. To use one of the president's favorite phrases, Sean, one that he again used today. We'll see what happens.
All right,
Sean.
Kristen, at the White House tonight. Thank you. Here with reaction author of the upcoming book, Don't Miss This, June 5th. Available pre-order on barnesandnoble.com, Hannity.com. Truth, Trump's America, the truth about our nation's great comeback. Former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor Newt Gingrich. Let's see. No more missiles fired. The media is invited to watch the weapons site, launch site, get literally torn down. He crosses the DMZ, Kim Jong-un. Hostages are released. His ego's bruised, and he might pull out. What have we lost? I don't see a thing.
I thought Sarah Sanders was perfect tone in the clip you just had. You know, if he'd like to meet, we'd love to meet. If he doesn't want to meet, we won't meet. The president himself said earlier, you know, we may not get a deal. And if we don't get a deal, guess what? All the sanctions are still there. All the pressure is still there. All the isolation is still there. I think that's exactly the right tone. Let Kim Jong-un dance around this huge country called America and all of our allies, and he can posture, he can play games. In the end, it's really simple. Does he want to stay under this level of pressure and watch his regime gradually crushed, or does he want to give up his nuclear weapons and find a very, very different future, as Secretary Pompeo described to him? You know, and imagine 20 years from now that North Korea had as much electric lights at night as South Korea. That would be an amazing future. He's got to choose it. We don't have to choose it. Kim Jong-un has to choose it.
You add Iran to that. You add Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. You add 14 states, record low unemployment for African Americans, Hispanic Americans, women in the workplace, record revenues to the government, even a surplus we haven't seen since you were Speaker. Amazing times. Here's the question I have. You see what they did for Hillary. It was obvious crimes committed, obvious obstruction. It's incontrovertible. You see the fix was in months before they even interviewed her. You see the FISA courts lied to, given false information again and again for a year. And I'm looking at all this and I'm saying, how is this happening in our country? I am very concerned about the abuse of power. I think it's much bigger than Watergate. Thoughts?
Well, I mean, you should be. Every American should be very concerned when you learn that the top two people at the Federal Bureau of Investigation were clearly dishonest and clearly broke the law. When you learn that you've had, I think, going all the way up to the president, to President Obama. But we saw this visibly after the Benghazi raid when the administration, the Obama administration, went out and for a full week deliberately and knowingly lied on national television to the American people. And I think what you're seeing happen now, which is very different qualitatively, is you're beginning to see with the Inspector General's reports, with other information coming out, that the system of corruption that Obama and Clinton were in charge of is gradually beginning to unravel. And as it unravels, we're going to learn more and more. For example, what's the identity of the so-called FBI spy who was in the Trump campaign?
Well, I would say I'm going to be very
which
familiar
Andy
with his
McCarthy wrote about
initials.
today.
I would say I'll probably be very familiar with his initials. We all know.
I suspect you will.
Mr. Speaker,
but
go ahead. Yes, sir.
No, I'm just going to say, but imagine you and I are talking about the Federal Bureau of Investigation working inside a presidential campaign in a way designed to entrap and potentially destroy the legitimate nominee of a major party. We have nothing like this in American history, and all I can say is I am so grateful that the American people defeated Hillary, because if she had become president, we would have learned none of this. The corruption would have gotten worse. It would have gotten deeper.
Mr. Speaker.
The sickness would have continued. We would have been in tremendous trouble.
You're right about the FBI spy. We're right about the crime she committed. We're right about the fix being in. And then to add to all of that, a FISA court to spy on an opposition party candidate associate in an election year using bought and paid for, foreign national put together Russian lies, never corroborating, never verifying, and never telling the judges in the original application or 3 subsequent renewals she paid for it. I can't think of Watergate, break-in. I'm sorry, that is minor in comparison to what we're talking about here.
Oh, look, you go back and you look at what started Watergate, and it was a couple of guys who were stupid. You look at this, you're talking about people at the very center of the American system, people who were responsible, had sworn an oath to enforce the law. And think about what it does to the morale of all those FBI agents who are honest and decent and hardworking.
I feel bad
who
for
really
them.
do want to have pride in the Bureau. I mean, this is a devastating example of corruption.
Mr. Speaker, good
Well,
to
they
see you.
should be mad. They've been betrayed.
Well, the people that are most angry that I talk to are FBI guys and intelligence guys. Mr. Speaker, good to see you. All right, when we come back, the media, apparently, they actually want the country to end up failing. They hate Trump that much. Sean Spicer, Ari Fleischer, as we continue. All right, some members of the mainstream media, they have been almost giddy, gloating. News, North Korea is threatening to pull out of the summit in Singapore. Here's some examples.
This was utterly predictable once the president was so eager to accept the terms before the terms were even spelled out.
Did President Trump, do you believe, make a mistake in all of his optimism about his upcoming summit with Kim Jong-un?
In this case, it's Kim Jong-un holding that football. And President Trump, not Charlie Brown, left swinging in the air.
Many times before.
As it has happened so many times before. North Korea has done a 180.
Donald Trump, as Gordon said, has had his nose rubbed in it by the Chinese, by the North Koreans.
After North Korea threatened to withdraw from talks, President Trump is trying to manage expectations, saying of the potential summit, maybe it will happen, maybe it won't. But North Korea experts say, based on prior actions, the White House should have seen this coming.
All right, big surprise. What they don't report is that President Trump, he gave him nothing for the release of the 3 hostages. Thankfully, they're home from North Korea. Kim Jong-un, well, he needs the summit to happen more than the U.S. Here with reaction, author of the upcoming book, The Briefing, former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer is with us, and former White House Press Secretary, Fox News contributor Ari Fleischer. It's a sad position for Democrats to be in. All these 14 record states on low unemployment, all these different demographics on low unemployment records, you know, the president, North Korea is a great thing. For them to be happy, he has to fail.
Well, that's all true. But, Sean, I have a surprising conclusion about how bad it is with the press. It's actually good for Republicans because the press is so separating itself from the American people, particularly in the battleground states, that the Democrats read their good, favorable press clips, they read the vehement anti-vitriolic Trump clips, and they believe them. And the more they believe the good press they're getting, the more they separate themselves from the voters. The press has separated themselves from the American people. So you have a slice left that believes the press.
You might be the last press secretary that ever had a chance at that job. I mean, I watched our friend Sean Spicer, who did it. Sean, I don't know how you did that job. They can't pay anybody enough for that job. And Sarah Huckabee is amazing. She has the patience of Job. I could not do the job you two have done.
The wounds are finally starting to heal. But I would agree with
Can I just say something on North Korea, though? Look, the funny part is all those clips forget what the president said at the beginning, which is, if we get a deal, great. I might walk out. He laid the predicate for this a long time ago, and everybody's forgetting how he approached this to begin with. That's the important thing. The president has made very clear that he's willing to meet with him, but he's willing to walk away from the table. That's what all of these people in their reports have forgotten, and you're absolutely right. He's gotten Kim Jong-un to give 3 American hostages back. He's gotten them to start talking about denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula. Unemployment's at a record low. So many millions of Americans are benefiting, and they are doing whatever they can to figure out what negative news to cover, because at the end of the day, what's so fascinating is most Americans are saying, you know what, this president's keeping his promises, he's getting things done, and America's a better country before it. So I know that for a lot of folks in the press corps, they're trying to figure out, well, where else can I find? What can I go after them on? But at the end of the day, Ari's right. They continue to show how wildly out of touch they are with the American people, because the president is getting results both domestically and foreign policy-wise. He's keeping the country safe. He's developing jobs. He's creating a robust
economy. Bring it back to North Korea for a second, Sean. Bring it back to North Korea for a second. If Trump decides he's not going to go, the press is going to blame Donald Trump. If Kim Jong-un decides he's not going to go, the press is going to blame Donald Trump. They will not blame the communist totalitarian dictator. They'll blame Donald Trump. And this is
what about the 3 hostages? But at the end of the day, crossing the DMZ? What about no rockets fired over Japan?
Well, they covered the hostages, but it was a one-day story. But this is, again, Sean, my point about how the press is separating itself from the people that they rely on, depend on to buy their papers and news. Jill Abramson, the former executive editor of the New York Times, said that every time Trump calls them fake news, she hears a ka-ching of the cash register as more people subscribe online. That's the curse of the New York Times, because the people who are subscribing online are so oppositional to Donald Trump, the New York Times has to deliver the opposition. It's becoming the voice of the opposition. Newspapers, the media cannot be oppositional. They have to be factual, and that's what's gotten lost.
How do you explain how horrible CNN... By the way, I want residuals from CNN and MSNBC because they run me all the time. It's so unfair. They need to pay me. Zucker needs to pay me. But in all seriousness, they're not doing well with this. When do they? If I was watching the president give a speech and they were chanting, "Fox News sucks," I might take it seriously after a while.
You know, the funny thing on my end is during the campaign season, I was very public. I gave a lot of credit to CNN in terms of how they covered the campaign, how they ran their debates. And then suddenly on January 11th, when Jim Acosta decided to become a carnival barker, they decided to change their entire model and realized that their model was now to try to follow MSNBC and become the other resistance. And I think it's sad because they've made it personal, and their ratings are suffering because of it. And I think that they've gotten now every one of these hosts goes on air and tries to outdo themselves as if Chris Matthews has become the model for them.
And the problem is the press's job is not to be the resistance, but they enjoy that role. They relish it, and they always do it to Republicans, and they particularly do it to Trump. And it's going to get worse even when Trump's gone.
Thank you both. Hard job you both have done. Amazing. Actually, when we come back, the Daily Caller asks D.C. residents whether they rather date a convicted felon or a Trump supporter. Next. All right, so we've got to run a video of the day, and it was going to be questions asked.